Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest WildArt Live. And today I'm going to be talking to Michael Snedic, one of our new judges. So I'll be introducing you all to him, and we'll be talking about some of the new WildArt categories, and in particular Tiny, which was Michael's concept. So we'll get to talking to Michael in a minute. But before we do that, I just thought I'd take this opportunity to thank everybody for entering Light. So if you entered Light, thank you very much for that. There are some fantastic pictures in there. I've been through them. And oh my word, the judges have got a very tough job to sort the top 100 out from that, let alone the winners. So well, they'll be getting on with that over the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm hoping sort of later on in April we'll be able to release that top 100. So keep your eyes and ears open for the announcement on that. Obviously, for April, our category is wet, so that's obviously open until the end of April. So make sure you get your images sorted for that. And I just also wanted to remind you about the conservation cause as well that we're supporting this year. If you didn't catch up with the live that I did with Georgina a few weeks ago, then do give that a watch, because it's it's fantastic stuff. So basically what we're trying to do this year is support Georgina in her efforts to raise money to buy a very important area of wetland in Australia close to her home, which is home to breeding Australasian bittern, an endangered species, along with loads of other really important stuff. So do go and have a look at that. And there is a link in the show notes, and I'll pop it up on the screen in a minute for you as well. So if you get something out of the live today and you've enjoyed the show, then just go onto that donation link straight to the donation page and just give whatever you can, a couple of pounds, a couple of dollars, whatever it might be. That would really be appreciated, because that's what we're trying to do this year. And also I'll be giving away £10 for every book that we sell from now on to that cause as well. So if you haven't got a copy of the collection one for WildArt Photographer of the Year, which is obviously our first competition, then I have reduced some of the postage charges on that as well. So if that's been putting you off, there is a reduction in particularly the international postage charges. So go on and have a look and get yourself a copy of that if you haven't already done so. If you live in the UK, it's free postage now. So do go and grab yourself a copy of that. Okay, so sorry about all that. I just thought we'd get some of that stuff out of the way. Anyway, I've got Michael all lined up, ready to talk to us. So let's introduce him and talk about some of the new categories right after this. Michael, good day, as you Aussies say.
G'day, hey. How are you, Rob?
Good I'm good, here. Thanks. Yeah, how you doing?
Really well, thank you. Yeah, no, yeah. Obviously with traveling and just having come back from Kenya, a little bit of jet lag, but I'm on the mend. I'm back into it. Had an actual weekend off, and back into it tomorrow. So no, fantastic, doing really well. Thank you, thanks.
Good stuff. Well, we'll talk about Africa in a bit, but I thought we'd start by, why don't you just tell people a little bit about you as a photographer, and just basically introduce yourself, because obviously you're new to the WildArt judging lineup this year.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I'm an Aussie, of course. I live in Brisbane, Queensland. I've been photographing. This year will be my 28th year of photography. And I've always loved very passionately nature as a whole, macro, wildlife, landscapes. Not interested in photographing people or buildings or product. No problem for those that do at all. But my passion, the reason I got into photography, was really my absolute love of wildlife, the environment, and always outdoors. And I've been carrying the camera around for, as I said, nearly 28 years. I've also been running photography workshops and tours across Australia and the world. Now hitting my 20th year. This June will be 20 years as well. COVID put a dent in that. As you know, us Aussies, we were locked away for 2 years. We weren't allowed out. And boy, oh boy, since things have eased up, it's been fantastic. I'm a Nikon school tutor here in Queensland. There's only 2 of us, even though I teach all brands. I write for the largest selling photography magazine, Australian Photography, and have done so for 17 years now, judging various competitions, including the biggest bird photography competition, Australian BirdLife.
Yeah, with Georgina as well, because she's a judge on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Georgina and I are on the panel. Yes, and again this year, 2nd year in a row. It's which is fantastic. So that that's me in a nutshell. And so I genuinely, it's not just, I'm not saying this to impress, but I love what I do. I love sharing my knowledge with people. Obviously, it's my living, my income, but there's nothing better than getting out there, helping someone. The penny drops, and then all of a sudden, it's great. You can see people really take off. And of course, I love getting out there with my camera as well. Being Nikon, as you can appreciate, Nikon school tutor. I've got the amazing, incomparable Z9, which is truly.
Yeah, I'm jealous of that one.
I know you are, Rob. I know we talked about it. This is not a spiel sponsored by Nikon, but I say it openly. In all the years, I've never ever experienced anything like it. It's the most remarkable camera. Yeah, and I know it's been around for a little while now, but it's an incredible piece of camera. Yeah, with all the different associated lenses, of course.
Yeah, it's an amazing. Well, I mean, obviously Josh and I had that discussion about mirrorless on the podcast versus DSLR, and my word, the advancements, over the last sort of 2 or 3 years in particular, with cameras like the Z9, and obviously with the with OM systems, the OM1, and all those sorts of things, and obviously that's our sort of prize this year will be $5,000 worth of equipment.
With the OM1, for example, I mean, the eye tracking as well, it's phenomenal. I mean, I know people and some of my guests on workshops, friends use, the different OM system. You've got your Canons, your R3, R5, R6. You've got your Sonys. They're all leapfrogging each other. And the technology, I mean, to me, it's an exciting time to be and continue with photography. And to be able to track birds that are so insanely fast in the air, like swallows and swifts, and once you lock onto them, they're yours. And I think that's exciting. I mean, I know it's been around for a while. I know people are thinking, goodness, we've had that for a while, but each time there's a new model. Or a new upgrade.
But when it first comes out, it's not really the secret sauce, is it?
That's right.
It takes time for it to evolve into something that gets really efficient. And as you say, this is a really exciting time.
And also the frame rate.
We're going a bit off piste here, but hey.
That's right. But even like the frame rate, for example, if you look at some of the frame rates on the different, you talk about the OM systems, which of course, for those that may not know, was Olympus. They've had a name change. And Nikon and all the Canon. I mean, the frame rate is incredible, raw files. So the biggest issue, which is such a good problem to have, is having so many images to download when you're photographing action or, birds in flight or cheetahs running after prey. And you've got so many images, but it's brilliant because you can choose exactly. You can. It's fantastic. So really, really great time to be in photography. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, talking of the podcast and talking of your recent trip to Africa, we're going to be recording a podcast with you this coming week, hopefully, if we can sort it out with and get a time sorted with where we can all do it with Josh as well. And we'll be talking about photographing African wildlife. So I'm hoping that if we can do that this week, then we can get that out by next weekend. So that'll be an interesting one to do. And we'll talk to you about your recent trip, because there you were telling me off air just before we came on, there's you've got a pretty amazing story to share with everybody on that. So we'll save it for the podcast.
We will. Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, right, let's just see. I see we've got one comment coming in. So what's that? Rachel Piper's on. Hi, Rachel. And she says, hi, everybody.
Hi, Rachel.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you on again.
Love your work. I know you work well, Rachel.
Absolutely. Well, you'll never forget that spider's web. That's for sure.
No, that's it. You betcha. And more. She's just not a one web lady or one web shot lady. There's so much more. Look at your work, Rachel. Beautiful work.
Yeah, she's certainly not. Right. Oh, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop a banner up for everybody, because we talked about, this wetland. I don't know how to pronounce this. Georgina pronounced it perfectly, obviously, when we chatted, but I'll just put that up on the screen. Just to say to people, that's the conservation cause that we're supporting this year. And if you get something out of this chat, and you just go and donate £1 or $1 or whatever you want to do, there's the link, and just to help us help Georgina raise the money to buy this really important area of wetland.
It's an incredible wetland. And as you know, I mean, I'm on the other side of Australia. I'm in Queensland and this is in Western Australia, but it's such an important piece of land, biodiversity, and not just the bittern that you mentioned, but so many wildlife species. And the money's going towards purchasing this property. It's not like, we're going to spend, people donate and 90% goes into staff wages and then 10%. This is all so, every little bit helps. So anyone, like you said earlier, Rob, that can donate, I think this is such an incredible cause. And my gosh, to have this protected, brilliant. Good on Georgina and all the others that are working really, really hard.
I mean, what she's doing is amazing. And
absolutely.
as I said, as we discussed when I did the live broadcast with her a few weeks ago, and do go and check that out, everybody, because it's quite an interesting discussion. But I firmly believe that ownership is the way forward with conservation, because if you own something, not that we ever truly own anything. I mean, we're just custodians, aren't we? But if we legally own something, then we've got so much more influence. And it's much more permanent. So I think
and a far better chance, of course, of protecting it and not worrying, what's going to happen with the current owners, or what happens if it's, attached to farmland. And that's, it's really important. So there's already some decent money being raised, but there's quite a bit more needed. And I think, fantastic. Well done for helping to promote on here as well with WildArt, Photographer of the Year, and what you're doing.
Well, I mean, this is what WildArt's all about. It's all about building a community of people. It's all about openness, and it's all about helping conservation, not only with things like raising money, but also raising awareness and educating people as well. I mean, and I don't mean that in a patronizing way, because people are educated, but it's sort of letting them know about things that perhaps they weren't previously aware of.
Exactly.
Because we're always learning. There's always things to learn in life. So,
and in the world that we are living in and have done for decades of, the world of internet, people may look up Yungadup wetlands, Yungadup. Even I'm trying to.
Exactly.
But you can look it up. You can basically get onto the website, have a look, see some photos, see for yourselves. It's that's the good thing about it. You can instantly see what you would be putting money towards to help protect.
Absolutely. So there's the link, and in the show notes as well, there should be a direct link onto that, and it goes straight to their donation page. So, but you can go around that website and have a look. For yourself,
that's great. It's really good,
and see what it's all about. So no, that would be really appreciated. And I'll do this. I'll remind everybody every time we do a live.
Fantastic. Well done.
My way of trying to help. So let's catch up. I'll take that down, that banner down now. So we've got a bit more space on the screen. A few more comments coming in. Discover nature now. I always struggle with shallow depth of field in macro photography. Stacking doesn't work most of the time as long as the insects move. How do you cope with it? Well, that's a very interesting question. Michael, do you use focus stacking in your photography?
Don't. Surprises people. Focus stacking is a wonderful thing. If it's done correctly, honestly, the results can be quite amazing. The way that I've always photographed, the way that I've taught, and it's just my way. It's not me here saying that it's the only way, but I basically work as hard as I possibly can in camera to create what I can, and then of course do any editing that I need to afterwards. And if you're using, for example, a 50mm macro lens on let's just say a full frame camera, full frame DSLR, or on a mirrorless, and you need to be quite close and you're photographing something like a praying mantis head on, you will get only a part, even at f22 and beyond, you'll only get a part of that, the eyes or the head of that animal in focus. And I understand that. But I also, for example, I've got the 105 Nikon, and I've also got the 200 mil. By using the longer focal length and being that little bit further away, because the further away you are from the subject, the better your depth of field becomes. So that's something that definitely can work as well. If you're using extension tubes, then it's incredible. Like you can be on f36 or some ridiculously, excuse me, high numbered aperture, small sized aperture, and you'll only get a small fraction. Like if you're photographing a flower, and don't try to get the whole flower in, just try and get the stamen or a particular part.
Yeah.
But if you really want the whole subject really close, then focus stacking is certainly the way to go. There are a lot of programs that you can actually focus stack in camera. You can also use the old style macro rail where you move millimeter at a time and you take a shot, another. You can take dozens of shots and then you merge them later in the various programs.
Yeah, I think the problem with insects and things that move, of course, is that they're always in a different position when you're taking that next shot, and that's think
right.
the issue that's being referred to here. But I think there's no answer to that really, because they do move. If you've got
Yep.
perhaps you've got a close up of a flower or something that doesn't move, then
Yes.
focus stacking is an easy thing to do with that. But no, with insects and things, it's they move. You can't keep them still, and you just have to accept that. And personally speaking, my style of photography is that I don't want very much in focus anyway, because I like that sort of artistic.
You like that
look.
look,
And we'll get onto that actually, because I've got a picture in here that I'll share with everybody, which is a great example of that. It's just using one little tiny bit which is in focus, and then everything else is is falling away, and I quite like that style. So yeah, it's just
sorry if I missed a little part of that. Sorry, Rob.
That's right.
If I missed the moving part of it, is certainly an issue. And for example, if you're wanting to photograph moving insects like bees buzzing over a flower, using a flash, for example, a macro flash or a macro light is the way to go, because you can move around. You've got that light source. That really will help you. But if you're using extension tubes, handheld, or if you're on a tripod and that little insect moves, it is tricky. And that's, I guess, why when you see incredible macro shots, you can really appreciate the time, the effort, the patience that has often gone into that. It's not just bang, let's go take a shot and it's all over in seconds. So
well, I tell you what, let's share some pictures with everybody, because that's what we're here for. That's what everybody's waiting to see. So okay, so let me share this screen with everybody. I remember how to do this. There we are. Okay, let's share a window. There we go. Right. Okay, so that was the one I actually used for the for the thumbnail for the live event. So obviously this is a frog, but what species, Michael?
This is actually, it's simply a green tree frog. So this is photographed in southeast Queensland. As I mentioned, I live in Brisbane. And some of you, if there's any Aussies watching, and I released a 200-page coffee table book on wildlife a number of years ago, and that was on my cover. And basically, I used extension tubes. I used the macro lens, and I used a flash. You can see a little bit of the light there. And it was just capturing one part, a small section. And because I was using flash, and I changed with my ISO, I had my ISO at 100. The background was black as well. So I was able to really hone in and concentrate. And luckily, especially in the cooler months, the frogs are still around, not as prevalent as in summer, but there's no movement. The frog just didn't move. And I was able to manually, and I do manually focus a lot with macro, by the way. All wildlife, pretty much, it's autofocus, eye tracking, all of the rest. But I love to focus. The D850 that I've still got in my cupboard that I used for years, the SLR, I would often use live view, and I would zoom in right into the area, flick my lens to manual mode, fine tune exactly what I'm looking at, and then take the shot using a remote or a cable release. So there was no movement. I've got a Gitzo or a couple of Gitzo tripod, really right stuff heads, as what's the word? As stable as anything. And this here, yeah, this is a tiny little frog. And with extension tubes, I was able to basically sort of half or a third fill the frame. And Rob, you said that you like it one part. I worked hard to get the gold part of the eye, if you look at the frog, and a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bit of the green. But then if you look to the bottom right towards the black, as you're looking at the screen, and if you look towards the top left, you'll notice that that's blurred out. And that then, to me, that helps it stand out. So the
Because you're
eye,
concentrating, the viewer on the part of the subject you want them to
correct.
concentrate
And
on. Yeah.
and with this amazing color in the eye, the green, but then also having the black background, it just kind of worked for me because it made it stand out. And ironically, I mean, it's not the way that I intended, but then it left perfect room. The black area is where the title of my book ended up.
Yeah.
So, even though that wasn't by design, it just happened. And I was looking for a cover and I was back and forth. I had all these ideas. And in the end, I went with that. But no, that's certainly one of the secrets with something like a frog.
Yeah, something like this that isn't moving, going back to the focus stacking thing, you
Yep.
could do
Yep.
that with this. But
Exactly.
instead, if it's moving, then you're never going to capture the same frame, as it were,
Yep.
2 or 3 times in a row, because obviously the insect's going to move, so you're never going to get it as you
Yep.
could do with this subject that's still. But I use, it's interesting what you say actually about using your screen and then really zooming in and getting the critical part in focus, because I do that as well.
Yep.
If I'm
And
photographing something like
yep.
I do a lot of plants and things, and I use, actually, as well as the macro lens, I use my 2-500. And I
Fantastic.
really like
Yep.
that
Yep.
lens for that sort of thing, because I can shove loads of out of focus things in front of the lens, because
Exactly.
the actual glass area at the front is quite large. There's a
Yep.
lot of real estate to put things in front of, and you get it all out of focus, and then you're just focusing on that critical part. But if you do it with the live view and the screen on the back, and you pinch the screen and blow up
Yep.
the area that you want to
Yep.
focus on,
Yep.
you can
Exactly.
get that tack sharp. And the other thing is you can use focus peaking as well, can't you? With
Yeah,
it,
definitely.
it will actually, if you turn that on, it will actually tell you on the back of the screen which bits are in focus by coloring them, giving them a
Yeah,
color wash. So,
absolutely. And I mean, the color doesn't matter. You can choose colors, in a lot of the models, you can choose the color. But the thing also, if you are out in the field, you're photographing and you wear glasses, but you find it hard to photograph with glasses and you take them off, by zooming in, using live view or using mirrorless, where you're physically looking at the image, it's so much easier to see. And that's why I really love using manual focus when I'm doing macro, to pinpoint that exact spot that I want.
yeah,
So,
no, me too. When you've got something static like this, then it's fairly easy. If you've got something moving around, not so. But
yeah, exactly.
yeah, exactly. But no, you're obviously a fellow glasses wearer. With
That's right. That's right.
oh, when I tell you what, when you get to 45, that for me, that everybody used to say to me before I was 45, they said, "Oh yeah, Rob, you'll get to 45, and then you'll need to wear glasses." And I said, "Oh no, it's fine." I got to 45, and I thought, I can't see things anymore, and it's just got progressively worse.
And then that's the thing, though, when you look at it, without the glasses, I mean, does help to be able to zoom in, but I always have them with me. I've basically got the spare pair in my camera bag, or I've got a number of backpacks I use, camera bags, and it basically I've got them there. It's so easy to forget, and especially with we'll be talking about Tiny, the subject, and needing to get in close. You need to be able to see what you're doing and focus. Focus that's not right, it can, your image is basically lost if you haven't got that pinpoint focus on the area that you're trying to highlight.
Yeah. Oh, we just had a message in from Simon Runting. Hi, Simon. Hi, guys. Middle of the night for me. Yeah, being in New Zealand.
Oh, g'day, Simon.
So we'll join you for a while from New Zealand. I think the message said, it must be 1:25 in the morning for Simon. So that's a good effort.
Well done. It's a bit late for me, Simon, but not like you guys.
Yeah, crikey.
I was looking
so
across
well
because I didn't have my comments up, and I can see now, which is great.
Yeah.
Few comments coming in.
Bring those up. Yeah. So let's talk about, the concept of Tiny, shall we? I'll
Sure,
move this
sure.
on. I'll see what we've got next. I don't know if it's one of yours. Oh, it is another one of yours, so that's okay. Yeah, let's talk about the concept of tiny and what you think it means. I mean, obviously there's
Sure.
the macro connotation.
Yeah, no, when you and I, Rob, were having a chat quite a while ago, and you asked for just ideas for some of the judges, the regular judges, and me being a new judge, and I thought about macro, and then I thought, well, that's sort of macro. So often people think of plants and things are close up, and of course it's a part of it. But tiny to me, there are so many different, I guess, versions or variations of what you can use. So it might be like this is a little jumping spider, and by using sort of creative lighting and getting in nice and close. Here, for example, the eyes, the black, I concentrated because your eye goes to that. And then, of course, once again, you look at the body, it blurs out, but it's like the little spider sort of leaping out the head from it was on it's called an elephant, a conjivoi or an elephantier rainforest plant, and I used lighting. I just had a headlamp with me, a little head torch from underneath, added a bit of extra lighting. So any type of insects, of course, fit into this category really well. You can look at your spiders and the close-ups of things like the beautiful shots I've seen of dragonflies and close-ups of eyes of praying mantis and things like that as well. Tiny can also be, of course, birds. I mean, there are so many little tiny birds, not just your hummingbirds, from Costa Rica and various places around the world, but small birds, just being in Africa, coming back 4 days ago from Kenya, we had the little oxpeckers that were on the backs of elephants and wildebeest, and they were tiny. So it still fits in that category of tiny. It's a little bit like animals in the environment, where the environment is a very important part of the image, and you've got a small animal there. But with tiny, you could use something like a bird on the back of, an elephant, or just as an example, and it is really quite minuscule, and your eye goes to that, the color and the bird.
Yeah, so it's putting, if you use something in context like that, and it's just being creative, isn't it, with how you interpret the actual title. And I tell you what, and I've said this so many times, judges like to see different ideas when they're judging photographs. So it's not only the skill of the technical skill of taking the image, it's actually the eye of the photographer and the idea that comes across on that image. If you go, oh wow, I've not seen that before, why haven't I never thought of doing that before? Judges love that sort of thing, and it really gets them excited, and it stops them in their tracks from going through picture after picture after picture, and they'll take a really close look at that sort of thing. And that gives you a really good opportunity to get into a shortlist, and then that sort of further sort of scrutiny, I guess, by other judges, and you get basically your image goes further down the line in the process, and the whole selection process.
The thing, Rob, this is certainly a view of mine, always has been, in the different competitions I've judged over many years. And I was on a ship in the Russian Arctic a number of years ago when we were able to go there. Let's leave that one alone. But I was on a ship a couple of weeks with a chair of a jury chair of judges, and we were sitting there having a drink, having dinner, and he said, the thing is, what people do is they look at the winner, and then the following year we'll get 50 to 100 of the identical shot, but it's already been done. And I've heard you mention this before, Rob. Try to be different, try to be creative, think outside the box. An image for me as a judge personally, and when I go through and you look at hundreds and, more images, you want to look through, and then bang, something hits you and it's like, oh, wow, this is really incredible. What was captured, a moment or amazing light or incredibly creative, or just something that hasn't been thought of, and people are still doing that. And that's certainly what I'm looking for as one of, a number of judges that will judge. Is something that's just that's striking, but also a little bit different. So not repeating exactly what has won before. Sometimes the same image I've seen over the years with photographers that have got an incredible image, and that same image will be repeated, and then people think, oh, that's great, and we'll try and capture. But it is really a kind of copying in a sense, and it's great to try a similar technique, but just try something a little bit different.
Yeah.
If I may, to just continuing very briefly on even tiny things like we have flying squirrels here, for example, the little and all around the world, there's particular animals and little mammals that will leap out of trees, and little animal, even again in Africa, there's all these tiny little bush babies and things hopping around that could still fit in the category of tiny in the big picture in amongst a landscape. You can then get really close to the eyes of a fly, or you can get, you can even do sort of microscopic, like water droplets, reflections in water droplets.
Well, we've had algae and bacteria and things like that, taken through a microscope before. But I mean, I remember that one picture in Wet from year one was just amazing, and that would fit really well into, the category of tiny, for example, things that you can't actually see with the human eye.
That's right.
And that sort of microscopic view would, is great. Opening up. This is what I like about photography. It opens up people to. It gives you the ability to see things that your human eye can't see. And I was talking to a local camera club recently, and he's even saying that about things like when you freeze water, for example, if you've got a bird diving into water, or a bear shaking water off its fur, or whatever it might be, you can capture that, things that you can't see with your human eye, with a camera, because you can see all those individual water droplets and you can't. You just can't see that with your eye, and that's what makes photography so fantastic from my point of view, is that it gives us the ability to be able to do that.
Absolutely. But also for anyone out there that's watching, or will be watching later, and trying to get ideas, even not just one insect, for example. Think about, you might come across an incredible infestation of ants, and there's so many different types, varieties, or they could be miniature moths, or there could be spiders that have come out of the egg sac, and you creatively photograph them, and the list goes on and on. I was quite excited because there are so many interpretations to tiny. I mentioned earlier, I said flying squirrels, and I'm sorry, it must still be the jet lag. I was referring to gliders, things like squirrel gliders.
I know, yeah.
And so they all fit into the category quite well. But whether you use a macro lens really close with extension tubes, whether you use a microscope, whether you're using, like you said, Rob, a 200 to 500 mil lens to capture images that you may not, there may be a little bit of like a fence or a ditch that you can't get across, and you can get, as close as you can, or it might be an insect that you think, oh, there's a wasp's nest, I don't want to get too close. You can get great shots.
Not advisable to get too close to something like that.
That's right. That's right.
Let's see what we got next. Because of course fungi as well.
Yes.
I love people that take really creative images of fungi, because a lot of them, said, they're so tiny. It's like some plants as well. Getting that, getting a feeling of scale is sometimes really difficult. So you see these amazing fungi, and what you don't realize is they're just millimeters tall.
Absolutely. With my macro, if you look at plants, I mean, fungi is kind of my little speciality. I love it. This is one of my images as well, and it's a luminous fungi. But Rob, I haven't told you, obviously, and folks behind the scenes, there's no collusion here, but what would you guesstimate? How long was the exposure on this? What would you think? It's the middle of the night. It was around 1 a.m. in the morning in Lamington National Park, Gold Coast hinterland, where I lived and worked for many years and learnt my photography craft decades ago. But how long would you estimate?
So this is natural.
This is natural, absolutely, in the forest. Only lasts for a week or two, once a year if you're lucky. Dries out very, very quickly. But it's quite small, of course. But what would you think?
Oh, it's going to be something nuts, isn't it? So I'm going to say 10 minutes.
Yeah, how's that? 12 minutes. You're close.
Yeah.
No wind. It's on a tree. Basically using a noise reduction, long exposure noise reduction. And again, just manually focusing on the gills, on the sort of little lines there. And then, of course, the black makes that stand out. But this is not me adding color, or I don't do any of that. This is really what you're looking at. And the longer the exposure's open, the kind of more amazing and vivid. But then you need to be careful that you don't overblow. But fungi is definitely, it opens up an amazing field of opportunity. And flowers, I mean, how many plants do we have? Stamens and petals. And I hear, of course, I think in a few people have gone to some of your, like the botanic gardens that you've got in London, for example.
Yeah.
And you can spend hours and hours. You can go inside, no matter what the weather, and you can photograph these incredible things. Sometimes even bringing a little tiny little spray bottle of water along for plants as well. If which is acceptable. You're only adding a little bit of water. You're not doing anything wrong, but you can get that little bit of extra water and light reflection.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stop sharing that for a minute, because you're talking about plants. I'm going to bring up something else. So let me just bring up one of my images. Where is it? Hold on. Professional as always. There you go. So that's what we're talking about, isn't it? That's that sort of thing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which is one of mine. It was taken in the day, in relatively bright sunlight, but against an area of shade. You know what woodland? This is a woodland plant. I think it's.
Is this in the back of your place near where you live?
No, actually, this was taken on a shoot that I did for the Woodland Trust a few years ago. I can't remember where it was now. So I've done so many woodlands for them over the years.
Light, as we all know, I mean, light is such an unbelievably important factor, as are many, but light is certainly, to me, one of the top three. If you can get some incredibly good lighting, you're sort of partway there to potentially great photo. But look at that. Look at the light, even on the unopened green, the petals there, and the one at the back. And then you've got the one blurred out, which is, it's there, but it doesn't interfere. And then, of course, my eye went initially to the purple and the three little stamens and the movement. It's lovely, Rob, and that gorgeous background as well.
Yeah, thank you. But I mean, this is the sort of thing that we're talking about, isn't it? This sort of, the way that you can use depth of field and the way that you can use exposure compensation and all these sorts of tricks, and the way you can use light, because this is obviously photographed against an area that's in shade. So this is just a plant that's just caught a bit of light coming through the tree canopy, and I've just used shade in the background. So Jane O'Connor's just on. She says, hello everyone, and sorry I'm late. That's all right, Jane. You can always catch up with the recording. Yeah.
Hi, Jane. We were just waffling on until you got here.
So yeah, where's Jane?
No, welcome.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Okay, I can't remember what's that. Oh, I'll just move it on and see what's up next.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Oh, we're talking about. I won't dwell too long on this, but because you obviously had your
this is your one, Rob.
Yeah, this is a common toad.
Yeah,
and people on here will know how much I love toads, because in fact we've just finished Toad Patrol again for another year, because I run the local Toad Patrol in the village, as you know. So we've just finished up, because they just the migration's over now. But so this is actually one of our local toads, and again this is just using shallow depth of field, just on the eyes, and everything else I just wanted to melt away, and the macro lens is kind of perfect for that. This is almost seeing a toad as you don't normally see them. It's just my artistic interpretation.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Rob. It's definitely a different sort of view, but I love the fact that you focused on the eyes. The eyes are the most beautiful part of what people will often call an ugly toad. And look at it, your eyes focus on those eyes, and the rest is. So that is the thing that what you said earlier about using depth of field, shallow depth of field creatively. And to me, it's funny because it's even got that mean kind of look, the eyebrows. And I'm thinking of a politician from America here, but I better not say too much.
I think we know who you're talking about.
Look and that comb over look in the eyebrows. But anyhow. I love the frog. The toad. I just think, wow. And those eyes, you really wouldn't expect that. I certainly haven't seen this one before, but Yeah, that's great. And
And I
how
think eye contact's a really important thing in some pictures as well, isn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
What
So I
else do
don't
you
know.
have to surprise us?
Oh, well, actually,
Oh,
I thought we could use this because we've got another category called airborne as well,
yep,
which I think is pretty self-explanatory. So it's anything in the air, and that could be, I mean, birds in flight is an obvious choice, but it could
yep.
be jumping mammals, it could be flying insects, in this case, white-tailed bumblebee, I think this is, which is, I photographed this with Victoria, actually. I was out with Victoria Hillman
Yeah,
when I took
fantastic.
this picture a few years ago. So yeah, this is sort of a crossover between tiny and airborne. I mean, it could go into either, I guess.
Once
But yeah,
again, though, if you look at the what's the name of that exactly again, Rob?
I think it's a white-tailed bumblebee, but don't
White-tailed bumblebee. Sorry,
quote
yep.
me on it.
No,
I'm
no,
not
but
brilliant
look,
with
but that
bumblebees.
black and gold, and there it is flying, of course. That's where the focus is. And then you've got the lovely flowers, and even though the ones on the right are blurred out and the background's blurred out, that again makes it work. You focused exactly where you needed to. Well, I think, and you don't need to have all those flowers in focus. I think that just makes it really quite interesting, quite
No,
creative.
I'd love to be able to do it. Excuse me, frog in my throat. Talking about frogs and
You're
toads.
right.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to do it focused through, if I got those blossoms sort of right in front of the lens, and then had a little window that the bumblebee came into. So I've got all the sort
Yes.
of out of focus foliage and all the out of
Yep.
focus petals, and then get it through. But anyway, that's asking a lot. I mean, photographing these things, as people will know,
I think
handheld like this is quite tricky.
absolutely. I think in really good light, and if you're hand holding, and whether you're using manual mode or shutter priority or aperture priority, and you're up your ISO, whatever you do, but I mean, in good light, you can get away with it. In low light, this is where your macro flash or your ring lights can really help and freeze moments as well. And you don't have to use the tripod. The bee's moving; it's going from flower to flower, and that's the great thing about the macro flashes or the macro lights.
Yeah.
Head down to local gardens, your own backyard, your own the woodlands that you have nearby, or gardens. We've got a lot of native plants around where I live, and the bees are there buzzing away, and they just do what they do. And macro flash on the end of the 105 mil macro on the Z9, and off I go. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can use remote flashes as well and backlight these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Don't
That's great.
know what I've got next. Then this is what I was
Oh,
talking about, again,
goodness.
shallow depth of field. And we touched on, or you touched on dragonflies and damselflies. Again, I was with Victoria when I took this, because she runs
Yep.
workshops local to her, and does dragonfly roosts and those sorts of things. And I know people will know she loves her dragonflies and damselflies.
Yes. Yep.
And you see a lot of close-ups of eyes. You see a lot of sort of, I guess, more literal shots of damselflies in that sort of classic side-on pose, so you can see all of the
With the tail up
damselfly.
and
Yeah, and that
Yep.
sort of thing. I
Yep.
like coming at them head on, and I like using this sort of shallow depth of field approach. And you just get that sense of the wings in the background, and you
Yep.
just get the sense of the leaf that it's sat on. But the depth of field is so shallow, because again, like you, I've got the 105 Nikon
Yes.
macro lens, which this was taken with. So I don't know what this was at, maybe 2.8, 3.2, something like that. And
Yep.
when you're really, really close, you're getting virtually nothing in focus apart from that area of the head.
But
And
look at that leaf. Look
yeah,
at that leaf. Like, it's just this beautiful, what I'd say in a very positive way, like a smudged out, blurred out green. And it's kind of like the dragonflies, it's sort of leaping out of this green. And again, to me, that's very creative. I like that. I like that approach, instead of just, as you say, a nice dragonfly that's sitting on a branch or whatever, which is nice. But this is something a bit different, which yeah.
so it's
Great.
amazing how creative you can be with these subjects. And
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
very, very rarely use a tripod, and this was handheld, because I kind of, with these sorts of things, because they're so small,
Yep.
by the time you get a tripod in position, I find sometimes that moment's gone, that the
Yep.
composition that I had is gone. I can't find it again.
Yep.
So I like
Absolutely.
to actually do this handheld, which is quite difficult to get the eyes in focus. So I tend to rock backwards and forwards and I just take loads and loads of shots, and then I
Fantastic.
hope that one of them actually has the bit the bit that I want in
Do
focus.
you use continuous focus and continuous burst, rapid
No,
mode, or what's?
I'm using manual focus here, and I'm just rocking gently backwards
Oh,
and forwards because I
goodness. Yep.
find that autofocus, even with a sort of single point, is
Yep. Yep.
it's just jumping around all over the place. So I manually focus, and I just rock
Fantastic.
backwards and forwards, and until I
And then look at them all on the screen
yeah,
later
and
and
then
just see which
exactly.
ones worked. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. So that's a little trick for people, actually. If you
Yep.
want to
Yep.
shoot something handheld and you're finding that autofocus, because the subject is so small in the frame, it's not locking on properly, or
Yep.
what I hate with this sort of thing is you just get it and then it jumps to the background for some reason because you've just moved the camera slightly.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
when you've got the continuous focus on, it'll jump onto the background, and then it takes a long time to sort of bring itself back again into the right
Back
place.
again. Yep.
Or I find I have to rack the focus back manually to get it then to
Yep.
focus again, because if it's focusing at infinity, for example, it's really
Yep.
difficult to get it to bring it back
Yeah. No,
to
no,
focus much
absolutely.
closer, I find.
Fantastic.
It hunts around. Anyway, a little tip for people. What have we got next? Oh, and this again, this is I guess using a bit more in focus, but bringing in another one of those elements that I really like, and that's bokeh. That's being sort of creative with the lighting in the background. So this is taken in my back garden.
What lights?
Excuse
Did you
me.
use a few little handheld lights, Rob?
No, that was light filtering in through the tree
Oh,
behind
wow.
it. So
Fantastic.
it's natural light just
Yep.
filtering in, through the leaves, obviously being summer. And I just saw it there and I thought, oh, well, if I use a macro lens, that's going to throw that well out of focus. And that's the key
Yep.
to bokeh is those sort of small points of light,
Yep.
and B is getting them really out of focus. And then
then that light coming through as well, the bristles on the caterpillar,
yeah,
because the light's
exactly.
in front of you or slightly to the side. That's great. And that again creates quite a nice effect and composition. You haven't got it going straight through the middle. You've got this rule of thirds kind of thing happening with the
Yeah.
left corner is the third and the right, side is roughly 2/3. So they're the kind of things to look out for. That's great. Really love that one.
Don't know what else we've got. Oh, and I thought I'd throw this one in as well, simply because it doesn't have to be an insect. It doesn't have to be a flower. It doesn't have to be, I don't know, a part of a bird or that sort of thing, the sort of classic macro type shots. It can be anything. And this is a dying leaf on a beech tree, but with
Oh, goodness.
that new bud coming through. So this would have been about probably February, March time. So you've got that new sort of winter bud, if you like. So the new leaf for next year coming through, and then you've got that sort of the dead leaf from last year. And all I'm focusing on, obviously, is the new growth in the middle and letting everything else fade away. But
What do you think your depth of field would have been? Your aperture would have been
2.8 probably.
2.8.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
2.8, something like that. So it's just using color and texture and that sort of thing, and just focusing attention on one little part of something. So
Great.
I'll have to get some more of I've got some more of yours somewhere. Hang on, let's go back, and I think there's another one. Right, talking of fungi, let's let's talk about that one.
Yes. This is actually not that it matters in any way, shape, or form, but this is my my most successful shot ever on Instagram. It's a bizarre thing. It got shared and liked, and goodness knows, it's actually the size. This is a fungi called a gill fungi, and about 20-minute drive from where I live, we've got rainforest, an area called Mount Nebo. Anyone that's from Australia, it's in the north of Brisbane, and it's the size. The actual part you're looking at would be the size of 3 to 4 match heads. So I'm using 3 extension tubes, all piggybacking each other. I had a macro lens. I pulled back that little bit further. I used a reflector, just a simple silver reflector underneath. I don't like using flash a lot on fungi. and basically just got down low so that I could get the gills. And of course, I just can't point here, Rob, to the photo, but the leading edge. So when you're looking at where that pink velour sort of ends and then the white starts at the top, there's that line, that little reddish line. That's where I focus. That's basically like my leading edge, manually focused. And I remember the background was a little bit busy. So all I did was I just turned the angle slightly. I moved till there was not much in the background. So I was able to blur it out. But this is really, really tiny. And this was f/36, which I rarely use, with 3 extension tubes, with that reflector. Very sturdy tripod, cable release I mentioned earlier in the interview. And just getting that light, that lovely light. And that is because it's so tiny, it's in the rainforest, most people never see it, let alone see the gills underneath. And it's us photographers, as you mentioned, we get to show these amazing tiny little subjects that you can sit here for a minute and you can look at it and kind of go, oh my goodness.
Because how would you know that's just millimeters tall? I mean, you just,
that's right.
Just wouldn't, would you?
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing.
And if I had have done a shot for the sake of this exercise and put something next to it, you'd see, oh my goodness, but it is so tiny. If I look at my pinky, my nail, it's way smaller than that. I mean, it gives you an idea. Yeah, very, very tiny. But to me, it was just important to, even though like that red, I call it suede look, the pinky look. It's in focus. That leading line is in focus. But then if you go to the back and the bottom of the white area that's in shade, it's slightly out of focus. But to me, it doesn't distract from the image. It was more about getting all that lovely front area in focus.
Well, what I like about sort of using macro lenses or telephoto lenses for that matter is that you do get this nice soft fall off. In terms of focus, that I just think it works really, really well. It's really, really, really well.
Yeah,
Panagoitis, I hope I didn't butcher your name, says use a camera with a smaller sensor or a smaller aperture. I think that's referring obviously to the depth of field and going back to that photographing insects and focus stacking them. That's a very good point, actually, because if you have a camera with a crop sensor, going back to our comments about OM system, for example, you'll find that they give a much better depth of field. For the same focal length lens you might use with, say, a full frame camera like the D850 or your Z9, for example.
Exactly.
The depth of field will be better, and obviously with the smaller aperture, again, you're going to get better depth of field. But as you mentioned earlier, Michael, I think the most critical thing actually about depth of field is how close you are to your subject.
How close, and also how close the background is.
Yeah.
And that can really make quite a difference. And, the focal length of the lens that you're using. I was having just a look to the side. I've got the comments as well. And Discover Nature Now, he was asking about maybe use a high megapixel camera and cropping, but then will diffraction kick in earlier? I don't get a lot of diffraction in the macro, thankfully. There's not a lot in an image like this. If you're using f/22 and above, you can easily get diffraction. And for those that don't know, that means that the edges of your image start losing a bit of quality. But in something like this, it's a benefit because really the focus, pun intended, is on the fungi, whereas the outside is sort of blurred anyhow. So diffraction generally isn't too much of an issue. Whereas if you're taking a landscape shot and you want every part of that image to be sharp, if you're at f/22 or above, and meaning higher number, smaller aperture, of course, again, then you can end up with a bit of diffraction. But in macro, it doesn't seem to be an issue.
Yeah, no, I agree. Rachel Piper says, I'm going to have to leave you. Looking forward to watching the rest later. Well, thanks for tuning in, Rachel, and hope you enjoyed the rest of it. We managed to catch up with it. But okay, let's. I don't know what's up next. Now this I found really interesting because I thought this was a very good take on tiny. So not taking the close-up approach, but using a small subject, small in the frame. I thought this was a really good example of thinking a little differently
Thanks, Rob.
about how you interpret the category. And this is
Yeah,
what I
no,
wanted to get people to start thinking about. Don't just
sure.
think, "Oh, it's got to be macro. I've got to show detail. I've got to have a small subject."
No,
Think a little bit differently.
and I guess that is why I included this particular image. And obviously, I used, when I say obviously, I mean, I shouldn't assume, but I used a wide angle lens, quite wide, got down a bit low. There's a bit of clouds and blue sky. And I was photographing, and it was, this was during COVID. There were points here in Australia, the Aussies will know, and depends what state you lived in, by the way, but we weren't allowed out to past certain points. And then after a certain point, we could go within certain kilometers. So I went to my local botanic gardens 3-4 times a week. I hadn't been, my life's so busy normally, traveling the world, running my photographic tours. And I spent many months just going around the garden, knowing where the plants were, photographing. And this, it's actually a native bee that was flying. And because I had really good light, good speed, I captured. And then I thought, there you go, tiny, because we look at that and we go sunflower, and then you look to the right slightly and think, my goodness, there's a little insect there. So that's why I did include that, Rob, because it's not always just about the macro lens and the extension tubes. It is also having that tiny insect or whatever it happens to be in amongst a larger flower or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, because I mean, we're using a shorter focal length lens here. It's a fairly wide angle, presumably.
Yes,
I mean, it gives you a much better depth of field anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By memory, this was a 14 mil, so it was a 14 mil lens on a full frame camera, and so even by memory 5.6, the whole flower's in, and that the insect as well. But but there weren't many around, and I wasn't. I could say that I spent an hour and a half in the burning sun, and I could make this great little story. Reality is that I was photographing the sunflower, just thinking, great, it's one of the ones without the petals dead or gone or eaten or whatever. And then the insect came in, and once I looked back on my LCD and zoomed in, and I went, oh wow. And when we started talking about this category, that's why I thought I'd send that along.
No, I think that was, I picked that out because I just thought, no, that's a really good example.
Yeah, great.
Of thinking about the subject a little bit differently. So this is what I want people to do. It's just, the categories for wild art are designed to allow an element of entrant interpretation.
Yes,
to get
absolutely.
you to think and to get, and then if you take something and you enter something that then makes the judge go, oh, I hadn't seen that as part of the category sort of design, but that's really clever. That's what you want to get to, I think.
Yeah,
because that's another way of making a judge stop and go, oh no, that's really quite smart.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Have we got a couple more?
Yeah. Well, I'll share this one, which is some sort of mayfly or other, which I photographed a few years ago. Oh, this would have been probably May or June, so our summertime, really early in the morning. So probably 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, something like that, just as the sun's coming up. And again, I've got an area of, I love photographing things that are catching the sunlight, but you can photograph them against an area of shade, because that contrast in terms of the exposure value, I love using that creatively, because you can just, you can work out, I like my dark backgrounds. I find it a really good way of isolating subjects. And of course, if you've got something covered in dew and it's catching that backlight, excuse me, you can get to you can create these sorts of images, and to me it just looks bejeweled. And I've seen sort of plenty of other subjects photographed this way, but it was just sat so nicely. And of course they're just warming up at this time, so they're not moving around, and there's plenty of opportunity to photograph.
Rob, would that be just like some dew on that? Because I don't know what the insect wings look like. What do you call it, mate?
It's a species of mayfly. Yeah, they're clear. The wings are clear, and that'll just be dew.
So just warming up in the morning, and fantastic.
Because you're in next to a river. It's very, very damp in the morning, and of course they'll just roost overnight, you know, on well, this is a stem of a reed, I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course, you know, they'll just get covered in dew.
Yeah.
And then they wait for themselves to warm up and dry out before they go off for the day.
And this is where the non-moving insect, it's great because you can
Yeah,
spend your time getting it right.
exactly. So you could focus stack that
Mm,
because it's not moving. I
not
didn't,
moving.
because because if I'd photographed that head on, bit like going back to my damselfly earlier,
Yep.
you get a lot less in focus. But I've gone side on here, so I've got it flat. You know, I've
Yep.
altered the plane of the camera sensor so it's in line with the angle of the insect itself to get a lot more in focus, because I wanted the shape of the body, and the most important things to me were the wings.
The thing is, if you were to photograph that head on, you just would not see the light coming through the wings. Like, it
And
wouldn't work.
that's the whole point of the picture
Yeah,
for me,
that's what
is
you're
the light
saying.
through
Yep.
the
Yeah.
wings. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and the dew. So
Yeah. Very nice.
okay, what else have we talked about? That one. Oh, and again, going back to plants is a snowdrop, but this again is using, as I was saying, this is with a 200 to 500 mil lens, so not a
Yep.
macro, but using a load of out of focus foliage in front
Yes.
of the lens, just to concentrate the viewer in the one place that you want them to look, and then everything else is texture and color.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that those sorts of techniques are,
Rob,
you know, are
before you
quite good.
move on, there's one I actually just thought of too, which I was thinking during the week. Even using for the category tiny that we're talking about in particular tonight, or tonight for me here, motion blur, what I call motion blur, ICM, intentional camera movement, and just having fun with it, trying different things, using it on plants, textures, anything. And you might have a particular colored plant, very small, or an insect, and you can have a bit of fun with it, and it could still fit the category of tiny. It might sound strange, but if it's done well, you can actually do something like that as well.
Yeah. Don't be, and the thing about WildArt is not to be blinkered, I think, in terms of,
exactly.
oh, it's got to be this or it's got to be that.
Yep.
Just look at the category title, and if you come up with an unusual interpretation on it, it might well turn the judges' heads and go, no, I like it because that's clever. That's a clever use. I think
Absolutely.
there was one entry in color last year that sort of I think is a good example of that. I think it was Devon Jenkin actually had a picture of an alligator, or was it alligator? I think it was alligator or a crocodile. I think it was an alligator.
Yep.
Where the body was black and white, but he'd kept the eye, a color, he kept the eye in color.
Yes.
So all your attention was drawn on the one eye. So so you've got this category called color, and you think most of the time you want a really colorful image, and the saturation slide is going to be pushed to 11 and that sort of thing. And I know that most of the image was black and white, but the eye was in color, and I thought that was so clever.
Drew you right to it.
Yeah, and this is what I'm talking about. Yeah, this is what
fantastic.
I'm talking about. Going back through my images here, I think that I'll tell you what I have got. I'm going to stop sharing that screen. I'm going to bring something else up, because I put them into different folders, just trying to. Let's talk about airborne quickly.
Yes.
And I've just got 4 images just to share, and they're pretty standard fare, to be honest with you. But let me just share that screen, and we'll just talk about airborne for a minute. Share the screen. Oh, slick as always. There we are. There. Okay. So birds in flight, so that's pretty standard stuff. But think about, if you are going to enter an image of a bird in flight, for example, if it's just the standard bird against the blue sky, don't expect to do too well with it. Because it's that's sort of pretty standard fare,
quite common. That's right.
Yeah, but if you've got something like this with a bit of backlight going on, you've got, I call this King Canute, this image, because you've got this one bird who's King Canute, the guy who the guy who sort of sat on the beach and said, no, the tide's coming in, I can make the tide.
Of course.
Anyway, so that's
well, his mates are off.
His mates are off, and he's sat there defiant,
But it
So
tells a story. That's another thing with photography in general. If you can tell a little story, that's a
yeah,
story's worth a million pictures. That's the old phrase.
yeah, storytelling's a very good way to get judges to
Yep.
look at an image. If there's lots there to see, and there's stuff you can keep coming back to again and again and again, and it
Fantastic.
does tell a story. That's a really good way of grabbing attention. Again, doesn't have to be birds, obviously. This is in
Yep.
my garden. Just a what is it? Four-spotted? No, it's a broad-bodied chaser. This one's female broad-bodied chaser. So it can be dragonflies.
Yep.
It can be, if you're going to
Oh,
photograph birds,
yep.
try and put them in some sort of context or do them in an artistic way. And that can be a number of things. In this instance, it's kind of using a textured, an interesting background and a nice bit of morning light to make it just a little bit more interesting.
Beautiful old tree in the background, the fence, and then of course you've got the two with the light.
I'd have liked three. I'd have liked three. Three's always a good number.
The one behind the sorry, of course.
Yeah.
But you've got the light
Yeah.
coming through the wings, which is great.
Yeah. So so just think about, if you're going to photograph birds in flight, because that will be a popular subject in this category, I am sure, then think about doing something just a little different. And again, you touched on ICM.
Yep.
And motion blur. And again, this is me using the techniques that we were talking about earlier, about subjects in light but behind a background that's in shade. And for me, that I just love using that. And this was taken in Wales. We were staying in a house which was on the side of a valley, and the other side of the valley went into deep shade in the afternoon, but the gulls kept flying up and down the valley and they still would be in the sun. So this created, being a sort of grey and white bird,
fantastic,
there was a great degree of difference between the exposure value of the shaded area and obviously of the bird. There's probably 8 or 9 stops. And so I took the standard froze the motion type flight shots using the differential in exposure value to create an isolated subject, and then I threw in a bit of motion blur as the iterations of that image went on throughout my stay there. And so I think this is something like 1/25th of a second or something like that.
That's pretty good. That 1/20th to 1/30th, I mean, that's actually quite a good, especially in lower light. You can struggle in quite bright light, of course, but I remember when we were talking about categories, and of course I put tiny out there, and I remember you mentioning the word. We were having one of our long sort of chats, trying to work out the best time here in Australia to you, and we just went on and chatted. And when you said the word airborne, and instantly I went, fantastic. And I think here in Australia, for example, of course, we're famous for many things, but the kangaroo leaping in the air. Well, it's not flying, is it? But it's airborne.
It's airborne. I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't have to be. It's not just flying.
Correct.
Yeah. It could be a leaping grasshopper.
Yep, absolutely. And last weekend, I mean, I'd never seen. It was. No, I apologise. I don't know the exact name. I can't recall. But it was a bush baby that I'd mentioned earlier, and it was leaping like it had springs on its legs. And I went, airborne. I've been to Madagascar running, a photo tour. And we had the leaping, the shafachas and the lemurs and leaping through the air, and again, airborne. So there's so many different interpretations to that.
And it could be seeds on the breeze, for example. If you've got dandelion seeds or something like that blowing through the, they're airborne.
Exactly.
So this is the way I would like people to think about this category.
What
not
about
just
flying
the
fish,
obvious.
leaping dolphins, breaching whales, flying
Georgina's mud skippers.
I'm glad we didn't call it flying, Rob. This is great.
No. Well, that's why, when I was thinking about this, because I thought I do want something where because obviously in Bird Photographer of the Year we had birds in flight, and I wanted something that yes, we could have those sorts of things, but also was open to other ideas as well.
More. Yeah.
But as I said, you said you think about Georgina's mud skippers, for example, where she's got them flying through the air. And those sorts of things just be brilliant. I mean, it just
I'm heading in August up to the Northern Territory, and to photograph on a photographic tour for a change. Meaning on a photographic trip, not a workshop or tour that I'm running. And they've got crocodiles, and they'll every so often leap out of the air. There's another example with airborne. So yeah, fantastic.
Let me just show. And then the other category that we've got, and again, I'm going to sort of share some some standard fare, and then some other stuff. Let's just bring that up. I'll just share that screen with everybody, because again, we were having getting lots of images that really were, I thought, more in the sort of landscape type bucket rather than wildlife. So the concentration was on the habitat rather than individual wildlife, and it was quite difficult to put them into a sort of category in the stuff that we've run before, and there were such great shots. I mean, if you, for example, another good example of that is those sort of ice blocks on the beach in Iceland, those fantastic images you get of those, or there might be an erupting volcano or those sorts of things. And I thought, wow, this is amazing stuff. Or full colors in in America, where you get those lovely sort of reflection, the sort of lovely autumn colors and things that some of those guys over there take. And I thought it doesn't really fit very well with some of the categories that we've run previously. And I thought that's a great shame. We ought to have something that opens up, the arena to those sorts of images, and will award those sorts of things. So that's why I came up with naturescapes. And when I think of naturescapes, maybe something like this, which is something I took again when I was out doing stuff for the Woodland Trust a few years ago. That to me would seem to fit into naturescapes, because I think, yes, you could argue that it would go into light, but I think light is such a competitive category that it would be difficult for this image or something like this to do well in that category because of the competition. Whereas if it's more focused in a more habitat based, it's got a much better chance. And that's really where I wanted to get to.
I get there's so many in this category, Rob. There are so many different, I guess, choices people can make, whether it's rays of light through the trees, whether it's some amazing sunrise, sunset, whether it's a waterfall or a cascades, or whether it's mist, and even getting down really low and focusing on a plant and having that as your foreground feature, with then this amazing, like this view where you've got the blurred out view in the background. So it's a category that was kind of waiting to, I guess there's a lot of photographs out there that'll fit this particular category.
So I didn't want people just to focus on purely that sort of traditional landscape approach, which is one reason for throwing this one in, because obviously there's not a lot in focus here, but it's you get the impression, the background tells you that it's a woodland, whereas the focus is on the leaves in the foreground. So don't just look at it from a traditional, it's a landscape category.
Exactly.
It's not. It's and think of things like those sort of micro habitats, like patterns in rocks, lichens on rocks, those sorts of things. Those sorts of, it's a habitat thing. And then maybe, okay, you could argue this goes in abstracts, but these sorts of things is a reflection in water of trees.
Oh wow!
So these sorts of things, I mean, probably abstracts for that. But
with this image, what it did instantly, I'd not seen these, by the way, of course, but it made me think, I wonder what that is. How is that taken? And that's what I like. There's a bit of mystery to it.
Yeah, you have to think. Yeah, and I like photographs like that make you think. And
what about reflections? Just generally reflections.
Well, I had that's a category I've been messing around with in my head. Maybe for another year, obviously not this year. But that's on my list actually, reflections.
Yes.
So and again, when I was talking about close-ups of sort of lichens and things, and this is I know you've seen this image before, but things like this, if you're talking naturescapes, so that's a macro sort of naturescape. Things that you don't normally see. So just to try and sort of put it out there and make people think. And then again, this is just another woodland scene that I took last year, I think.
But again, that
During one
love
of
of
during one
flying.
of my videos, actually, I made a video in
Yep.
Savanac Forest. Um,
Fantastic.
so these sorts of things.
That's
And again,
great.
the classic wild garlic. You know, if you live in Britain.
My
And it's sort of,
apologies. I wouldn't have guessed the plant because I haven't. It's one that yeah. So
yeah,
that's
no,
wild
it's
garlic.
wild
Look at
garlic. It's
that.
called Ramsons, yeah. But I tell you,
Yep.
it's wonderful eating.
Great.
But don't go kissing anybody afterwards. It's pretty strong, but it's
Love
a
it.
wonderful plant, and that comes out sort of late April, early
Oh,
May,
great.
and you get these great big sweeps of sort of flowers in with the bluebells and in these sort of
You can see, yeah, that's
in these
lovely.
sort of classic woodlands. It's an
Mm,
amazing plant, and again classic sort of bluebell woodland, that sort of thing. So there's a mixture of the traditional, but do think outside the box with naturescapes
yep.
as well.
Fantastic.
So there we go. Anyway, so I hope that has given people a better idea of what we're looking for in these sort of 3 new categories, particularly tiny, because I think that one out of all of them is probably open to the most interpretation.
Yep. Yep.
Because the others are, I mean, I think the others are pretty, pretty obvious, but
Sure.
tiny, do think outside the box. Do think outside the box.
Yeah, I think with the categories that you've streamlined it. You've kept some favorites. You've added some new ones, and I guess if folks also just have a look back at some, those that are new to wild art that may be watching this now or down the track, have a look just to get an idea of some of it. I'm not saying copy, but get an idea as to the type of images. Also, get on out there and shoot and. It's great, and you can enter, as you can clarify, Rob. You don't have to wait until the first of the month to enter. You can enter any of the categories all the way through to the very last category, and that's the thing. So if you happen to be on holidays coming up, annual leave, whatever you call it, wherever you are around the world, and you've got time out and you're traveling, you can enter things, or you might be busy during a certain month. Enter, and also, of course, the more you enter, I mean, you've got different packages that you can buy. And I've started entering a few comps as well, just from COVID in the last couple of years. I had a lot of time and I started entering, and it's giving me projects and giving me goals, and I'm always working and thinking, and I think that's the great part of it. And you can always, Rob, you can clarify, you can always enter and then come back and add to it. It's not like you press the button once. Can you do that?
Yeah, you can. What you can't do is, if once you've committed, so you buy your entry package.
Yes.
Once you actually, and then the first sort of screen that you'll get to is you'll be able to upload a load of images. So at that point you've not entered the competition, so you can upload as many as you like, put them in your
That's
gallery,
what I'm referring to.
and then you can choose what am I going to put where.
Yeah.
But once you've committed an image to a category, and and it'll ask you to confirm, you sure you want to enter this image, and you go click, and you get a little green tick in against the image. That's the point. You can't change it.
Yep.
So so just be mindful of that. But as I said, the categories all close at the end of, as Michael was referring to, they all close at the end of the months that they relate to. So for example, obviously we've just had light, that closed a couple of days ago. What we've got running at the moment is wet.
Open.
And that will close at the end of April. But all the categories were open from whenever we opened it, mid-February or whenever it was. So you can, as Michael was saying, if you're away on a trip or whatever, you can enter well in advance, and know that those images are in. But what I was going to say about wild art is, and I think people have got this impression, well, I hope they have, because it's something that I've been trying to repeat again and again, is that this is all about being open and inclusive with our audience, and being a little bit different to other competitions in that regard, which is why the sort of monthly type process, it keeps people engaged.
Absolutely.
And I want this to be a community. I don't want it just to be, well, enter your images and well, you've won, you haven't, blah blah, off you go. I want this to be a place where people can progress with their photography as well, and learn, and those sorts of things, and just feel part of something rather than just you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, people may not know you've got a wild read and of course a wild vision with different videos and having
And
these
the
live
podcast as well. Yeah.
that's right,
Yeah.
podcasts, and then you have the announcement, and it's always exciting to have the announcement and the if the
Mm,
people are available, the winners are there and discuss with the judges. It's very inclusive, so it's a great
yeah.
and why I'm very very happy to be a part of this. It's
And if anybody's
fantastic,
got any
very exciting.
suggestion, if anybody's got any suggestions about categories they'd
Yeah,
like to see in future years, then do let me know, because I don't want to just repeat the same old things again and again and again, because,
yeah, yep,
as I said, this is a process about getting people to think, getting people to, to progress with their photographic
yep,
journey. And I think
yep.
part of that can be by introducing subjects where people, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Maybe I'll
Mm,
go out and maybe I'll do a project on that,
yeah,
and go out and
exactly.
shoot something.
Yep,
It just to inspire people to do something different. And that's what it's all about
yep,
for me. Going back
fantastic.
to, you mentioned a wild read. And I want to talk about that just a little
Yep,
bit now you brought it up. Is that what I'm going to do is move that over into a regular blog, rather than sort of
great.
doing the
Yep,
e-magazine that we've done before, because that is a lot of work. And
yep,
I
yep.
think a blog's a bit more interactive, and we can keep refreshing it and put new material on
Mm,
it, more frequently than we can with an e-magazine.
yep,
And it also means that we can invite contributions from our audience as well. So if somebody's got something, an
fantastic.
interesting article they want to share, then drop me a line, because I mean, I know, Michael, you've done a few articles
Yeah, no, yeah,
for it in
of
the
course.
past.
Yep.
Um, and that's what I want it to be. If somebody's got an interesting photographic technique, for example, that they've been
Mm,
developing and they want to share it with everybody, well, do that. Send me a few images, send me an outline of an idea,
yep,
and we'll get it on. And so I want to build that over the course of this year, and there'll be a separate mailing list for that as well, because I don't want to keep bombarding everybody with.
yeah,
I know people have had quite a lot of emails from me over the last week or so, but we've had a few things going on.
yeah,
But I don't want to keep bombarding people with email all the time. But I think so. What I'm going to do is separate that out, so people can join
yep,
up for that blog post. They don't miss a post, so we can send that out via email. It'll be on the blog, on the website as
fantastic.
well. So it's
Yep,
it's part of this community feel. So yeah.
fantastic.
Good stuff.
Yeah,
One more comment. Oh, two more comments. David Bauer says, cheers, guys. I enjoyed the chat. Gotta go now. That was a while ago, so I'm sure David's
yeah,
off. Anyway, thanks for watching, David. You can catch up with anything that you missed later on in the recording. And Mal Oswick says, hello, Rob and Michael. Damn it, missed this one live. We'll watch later to get some inspiration. Well, Mal, in fact, Mal, I've seen some of the work that you've been putting on on the Facebook group. And
mm,
yeah, some really nice stuff he's doing at the moment with that. Some
fantastic.
really starting to think outside the box. It's great to see people sort of
Yeah,
getting
and
inspired.
people trying, people experimenting. One thing I will say, and not just here judging here, but also in the different competitions over the years that I've judged. Sometimes people feel, oh, my work's not good enough, and I really think everyone, every single person who's started out there has started somewhere, and if you're out there, you're keen, you're passionate. There's no right or wrong. You try, and if you love it, if you really love an image or a series of images, enter them. And it's a good way as well of getting sort of feedback, seeing how you go. I mean, it's fantastic. So don't feel like, oh, everybody's too good. It's not the case at all. I mean, there are photographers who have got very basic cameras. They mightn't be able to afford the good gear that have won. And you know this, Rob, even from your past
Yeah.
with Bird Photographer and here with WildArt. So just get out there and try things and enter.
People have won awards with camera phones,
Point and shoot
and
cameras. Yep, yep,
GoPros and things like that.
yep, yep,
They because they've been
yep, yep.
experimental with them and done something a little different.
And the more you're
So
out there, the more you're out there, the more you
yeah,
photograph, the more
yeah.
images that you end up getting. And then obviously then the more that you enter, competitions like this, then and to me it's like exciting. You wait, you enter, and then you wait for the moment it gets sort of released, the top 100, and you work your
Mm.
way. But also just try, like we keep saying and repeating, try things. You mightn't be sure and just ask a friend, another photographer, a family member. Have a look and go, what do you think? I've got 5 images here. I want to enter, whatever. And people will be honest with you. But deep down, it's your work, how you feel. And
Yeah,
if you really love something,
I'm all for that. And in fact, I did write about this in one of the articles I did for
yep,
Birdwatching magazine. In fact, I mentioned this in some of the talks I do as well. I
yep,
I don't really care what other people think about my photography anymore. I
mm,
used to. That was the don't shoot for anybody else. My driving force in the past was what other people thought of my
yep,
photography.
yep,
I think
yep,
a mistake is not the right word to use, but I
yep,
think the
yep,
better way to look at it perhaps is just to
yep,
shoot for yourself. And
yep,
if that image
yep.
makes you happy and you like it, that is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
That is the
There
most
was a
important thing, because if
yep,
if you're entering photography competitions regularly and you don't take rejection very well, probably
yes,
ought to stop doing it, because it's a lottery to a degree. Yeah, you
mm,
can stack the odds in your favor,
yep,
but you have no idea when you enter a competition what other images have been
that's
entered.
right.
No matter
Yep,
how good your picture is, somebody
yep,
may have entered something better. You don't know what side of the bed a judge has got out of in the
yep,
morning when they look at your image. And they may
absolutely.
look at images in a different way on a different day.
I
So
remember
you've got all
you.
these factors.
Yeah, no, I agree, Rob. And I remember that you and Josh had a chat a while ago, and I'm pretty certain it was in one of the earlier podcasts where people so often, and without being ageist, but younger folk will often be completely and utterly like affected by how many likes they get on Instagram on a photo. And I can
Yeah.
tell you as a fact, there have been a number of cases where somebody's posted an image, it hasn't even received much feedback or so-called likes or whatever, and then they've entered it into competitions and done incredibly well. It really is what you said. If you're out there, you're shooting, you try things. I may be a professional, heading into 28 years of photography now and 20 years of teaching, but honestly, I get duds. I mean, I'd be lying through my teeth. You get duds, Rob. I'm sure you do.
No, oh, but always
No,
perfect.
not Rob Reed. But
No,
the
no
point
way.
being is we all do, and you learn and
Yeah,
you try things. But one thing, and I'm not here selling anything, I'm not, but the more you practice, the more you get out there with digital, it's not costing us with memory
mm,
cards compared to the old film days. The better you get, the like you just keep getting out there, you're trying, you shoot. Early in the morning, I hear people often say, "Oh, I'm not a morning person," and that's fine. I'm not a morning person, but I've been up hundreds of times over the many years, and the one morning nothing happens. Next morning nothing happens, and I'm really tired, and I head back and I'll grab a coffee on the way home and get my laptop out and start working tired. And then I'll go, you know what? I'm not giving up. That third morning, something unbelievable happens. The light, or there's birds in
yeah,
flight, or there's a rainbow beater, one of the birds here that catches bees in the light, and you go, you know what? If I hadn't have got up and made the effort or got out with my camera and just kept honing my skills, and that's why I really encourage people to just get on out, try
yeah.
things and enter, because you just don't know. And I mean, what
And
a
it's
fantastic,
so good for our mental health as well. I mean, this is the whole
oh
thing. I mean,
goodness.
this is
Yep,
what
yep,
inspires me, because I go through periods, and I'll be honest with people, I've had one this since the start of the year. I've hardly
yep,
picked my camera up
yep,
because
yep,
I found it, incredibly difficult to get motivated with it. And then
yep,
I've been judging another competition actually just recently,
yep,
where I mean,
yep.
well, it's as it stands at the moment, there's 8,500 pictures.
My
I
goodness.
just so
Wow.
I've been going through a lot of photography, but that's been, to me, it's proved inspirational, because I
Yep,
thought, oh, I've not
yep,
seen that before. That looks really good. I should be out there doing this. Why am I not doing this? And
yep,
working on projects as well is a really good thing. So, one of my things is to work on a project in the local woods and things, and just go and
yep,
take pictures of what I would say are ordinary subjects, just in an
yes,
artistic
yep,
way.
yep.
It doesn't all have to be, African mammals.
That's
We all
right.
love those pictures, going back to your African trip. And we'll talk about that
Yep,
on the podcast,
yep.
hopefully later on in the
Some more.
week.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always have to be things like the hero species. It can be,
Absolutely.
it can be the
Yep,
most common
yep,
thing in the world, like, bluebells, for example. For me,
yep,
this
yep.
coming up to this time of the year now, they're just starting to come out now.
Yep.
So in
You
about
mentioned, and then
3
here it
weeks'
is.
time. Yeah,
Yep.
about 3
You're
weeks'
ready.
time.
You're ready.
So, and I photographed them hundreds of times. I'll go and do it again this year.
For example, during COVID, when we couldn't go out, and I'm very fortunate. Just before COVID, my wife and I bought this lovely sort of 2-story property, very steep, looking down a valley, trees at eye level, and these gorgeous birds. For those around the world that don't know, they're as common as anything. They're called rainbow lorikeets.
Yeah,
Every color of the rainbow, brightly colored. And one turned up, and he was actually a hand-reared bird that escaped. He was being looked after. He'd fallen out of a nest, got wet, taken to a vet. It was taken to a carer, landed on my veranda, and he's been around ever since. And his name's Boy, and basically he's a wild bird. And that bird has given me so much joy. And I photographed him more than any other animal. And yet we have so many lorikeets that anyone, any Aussies on the East Coast will know, oh my goodness. I mean, flocks of thousands of them. They can be classed as a pest. And yet fantastic. It doesn't have to be, that like you say, that African animal or something rare. And
yeah, but you see, the thing is, your common is somebody else's rare anyway. I mean, this is the whole point,
Yep.
And
Yep.
when I think I was talking to Gail on the podcast, and we were talking about destinations, our favorite destination, and she asked me where my favorite destination was. I said Canada.
Yep.
I said because she said, well, isn't it amazing how we look at things
right.
differently? Because I think familiarity with something it doesn't breed contempt, but it's not as exciting as things you've never seen before, and I get that.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why I find Canada exciting, because they're, who doesn't love a bear or some of the other fantastic. Well, having said that, I think they've got some better mammals than bears. There's little things called these pikas. Have you come across those? Oh,
I have.
It's just the sweetest things you've ever seen. And the brilliant things to photograph. So they've got all sorts of stuff. And I was having
absolutely
a field day when I was out there. Yeah. Anyway,
but all the different seasons as well. I mean, we're now 2nd of April, and then we're in our autumn, of course, and fall, you'd call it in the States. But the thing is, wherever you are, there are always things happening. And like, I would love to be somewhere for a few months over winter, even though it can be cold and blizzards and all of the rest. But when you're out on a good day and you've got all those amazing, all the patterns and light through the snow and the snow crystals and the animals. And then at other times I think, wow, the desert, deserts from Namibia or in Africa. And then back home, we've got rainforest around us, and you can just go for a walk. Within minutes, I can be somewhere. And wherever you are, there's always something. There's always something to photograph.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned mental health. Goodness me, what a great way just to forget whatever is happening in the world. And I leave my phone either.
Yeah, well, that's another subject for a podcast. Actually, we've got lined up with somebody special. So
yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll do that. Anyway, fantastic. Michael, it's been really good to have you on, and it's been great to chat about these categories and share some photography, with people, and and hopefully give them a bit of inspiration and into the new, well, all the categories really, but
and a few ideas.
New ones.
Good. Thanks for having me on board. It's great. It's really great to be here and chat. And for those watching, those that are still here, thanks for what have we hit an hour and a half? We've done well.
Yeah. Well, we normally do. People realize it by now.
I know.
I always say I will do an hour, and they never do. But hey,
lucky
you're
I'm
getting
a
lot
night
for
owl,
your money, people. You're getting a lot for your money.
Lucky I'm a night owl, Robin. I don't mind, but I'm hitting.
Because it's quite late for you.
25 to 12 here, midnight.
Well, do you know, when Josh and I record the podcasts, we have to do it because it's going to be early in the morning for you, so you're going to have to get up early.
Right.
Thankfully, you've agreed to do that. It's Josh is great because it's 5 o'clock for him, but of course it's 10 o'clock for me. So by the time we finish, it's always gone midnight. By the time we've chatted and
I can imagine
and recorded the thing. And anyway, so
on a finishing note, as far as timing, it's interesting because I just in the last few years, my wife and I've really got into F1 and we're enjoying it. And quite often it's in the middle of the night, and
it would be for
I'll get up to go to the loo, get a drink, and I'll look, how's Verstappen or Hamilton going? guess what? It was on today in Australia, and then I sat there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and watched it like a normal person.
Yeah, with a beer.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
without having to think, oh my goodness, it's on at, you know, some ridiculous o'clock, because we're the
exactly.
ones that are way down under. So,
Yeah.
but it's great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the invite.
That's
I really look forward to seeing some of the images that people enter, and yeah, and then look forward to the podcast.
Yeah, well, we'll record that this week. So we're going to be talking about, you know,
Great.
photographing in Africa.
Yes.
And you know, particularly with your latest trip. So we'll talk to you about that, and obviously you'll share some of your stories. So yeah, looking forward to that, and hopefully if we can get it done this week, which, you know, I think is likely, then, you know, we should be able to get that out by next weekend.
Fantastic.
So I'll let everybody know about that. So, and if you haven't listened to the podcast, then do go and give it a listen. And you know, if you like what you hear, then you know, comments and likes and reviews are always good, because that sort of lets the algorithms find us and push us out to other people. So,
and there's some
you'll
great
find
subjects out there, really good topics. Yeah.
So you'll find it on the website under the community tab. If you click that, you'll get the podcast. It will drop down in the drop down menu, and we're also on all the usual sort of main podcast platforms.
Fantastic.
So Spotify and Apple, whatever they're called now, and Google. I think we're on that too.
Right.
So you'll find us there. Anyway, Michael, thanks very much. Hang on the line. We'll have a quick chat afterwards. Sure. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope you got something from that. Don't forget the conservation cause. So if you have got a little bit out of this chat, then go and donate a couple of quid, a couple of bucks or whatever to the conservation cause, which Georgina is championing. There's a link in the show notes, and I put a link up on the screen earlier in the show. So please go and do that. That would be really appreciated. And if you haven't bought a copy of the book, the year one book, then there is discount on that postage now worldwide to make it just a little bit more affordable. And I'll be giving away £10 for each copy sold to that conservation cause as well. So another good reason to go and buy the book. Anyway, don't know when the next live will be. I have to line another subject up. It might well be the presentation for light, but we might squeeze one in between now and then. So I'll have a think and see what we can line up. Podcast coming out hopefully by the weekend, as we were just discussing. So keep an eye out for that, and I'll let everybody know of timings of things in another email. So make sure you're subscribed to the email list as well, which you can do by going onto the website. Anyway, thanks very much for listening or watching. Even the podcast is for listening.
Thanks everyone
for watching. Thanks again, Michael, and yeah, we'll see you all again next time.
Thanks.
Cheers.
See ya.